guys, so I am here today to do my end of month reading wrap up for the month of April, which means I'm going to review for you the books I read in the second half of the month, but it also means I'm going to let you know how I did in the OWL's Readathon, which was a month-long readathon that ran for the entirety of April and is themed around Harry Potter and obtaining your ordinary wizarding levels. And each potential OWL subject had a task to complete in order to obtain that subject. So I am going to reflect back on my entire month at the end of this video and see which subjects I got my OWLs in. But first I'm going to review for you the books that I read. So the first one is Sealed by Naomi Booth, and I loved this book so much more than I was even expecting to. I first picked this up on a whim in foils because I thought the cover was beautiful and it was on display. Love when they display books, it's like an interesting way to pick up things you haven't heard of before. Read the back, thought it sounded interesting, but didn't buy it immediately and just had it in the back of my mind. Eventually I bought it quite recently and loved it. So pleased that I ended up picking this one up. It is sort of literary horror. It deals with themes of sort of grief, relationships, family, motherhood, and sort of like the mental struggles of adjusting to becoming a new mother and being pregnant and potentially not being able to identify as a mother and with this baby that you're carrying. But it is set amidst a sort of apocalyptic or sort of spiralling setting. So essentially there's an epidemic that is beginning to make itself known where people's skin is sealing over, like their mouths, their nose, their ears, and naturally without surgery this kills them. And our protagonist, who's this pregnant woman in a relationship who recently lost her mother, is very, very paranoid about the sort of spreading of this disease and what's potentially causing this disease. So it's like this hypochondria that she's developing that is seeping into every aspect of her life, and it's potentially a reflection about her feelings towards her pregnancy. But at the same time there is a real disease out there that is doing what she fears. So it's sort of like, to what extent do you see this as paranoia and an exaggeration, or to what extent do you see this as like a reasonable reaction to what's going on, and everyone that's still remaining calm is just completely oblivious to the dangers that they face. And because of that I think it's a really interesting mixture of things and emotions. And has you thinking throughout the novel. I really, really liked our protagonist. I found her a very interesting narrator to follow and explore her emotions, and it is very much exploring her reaction and her feelings amidst this epidemic. So it's that combination of kind of quite horrific, apocalyptic, dystopian setting with what is quite literary writing and themes, and I really, really love this. Definitely want to read more by Naomi Booth. I will say though, it really did creep me out. Like, I don't think horror is an exaggeration. I felt really unnerved whilst reading it, although I could not put it down. I then have a collection of poetry which is Vertigo and Ghost by Fiona Benson. This is a collection of poetry in two parts, and I almost feel like I want to review the two parts separately because for me they felt very distinct and almost disparate, and it made the collection slightly jarring for me. So I adored the first half of this collection, like 5 out of 5 stars, wonderful poems exploring a theme I was very interested in. And the second half are not bad poems, but they're just so different that I would have preferred two separate collections, and that's a personal preference and it depends what you look for in poetry. The first half is inspired by Greek myth and the prevalence of sexual violence in Greek myth, particularly surrounding the god Zeus and his many sort of victims. And I thought she did an incredible job of exploring that mythology and at the same time exploring modern themes of domestic violence, sexual violence, misogyny, sexism through these myths, and like really brutally she did not shy away from what are the disturbing facts about these stories, and I often don't see it explored in as visceral, harrowing detail, and I thought that was incredible. The second half focuses more on themes like grief, again motherhood actually, there's some like overlapping themes here actually. So grief, becoming a mother, motherhood, birth and family are themes that are explored in the second half, so they feel a little bit more personal. Not to say the first half isn't necessarily personal, but obviously it is tied up in those Greek myths I'm more familiar with, so the second half felt like more traditional, although it still maintained that very visceral, unapologetic style that was also true of the first half. I just loved the first half so much that the second half found it difficult to live up to that a little bit, which is why I think it would have been better as two separate collections that were expanded on slightly, because I would have had different expectations from either collection. However, I would still highly recommend this collection. I think what she's done is incredible, particularly in the first half, and obviously I have this massive preference for things that deal with mythology because it's my area of study, so that might not be something that you find as jarring a switch to as a reader who's maybe not as into classics as I am. But I don't want it to seem like I am saying this isn't a good collection, because I did actually really enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars, and I will definitely read more by this author. I then read Moonstruck Volume 2 by Grace Ellis and Shay Beagle. This is a comic book series that I love. It's super cutesy. Talked about it a lot recently, but here's an insight into some of the illustrations. Again, lovely colours, really cute illustrations and characters, who do get themselves into some scrapes, but nothing like terribly terrifying or serious. This is more of like a family friendly comic book series with incredible representation and relatable, fun, unique characters, which is what I love about it. So for example, 2 of our main characters are a couple made up of 2 women who are both werewolves. We also have some non-binary characters from different ethnicities, lots of different magical creatures like centaurs and fairies, but also humans. So this is set in a world much like our own, but where there are magical creatures mixed in with humans, but like mixed in to the extent where, you know, they go to the coffee shop and sit on their laptops and write novels and do their essays for university, or go to frat parties, which is one of the things that happens in this. So it's like ordinary life but with a bit of magic, and I think it's so cute. Adorable. I don't know what other adjective to use because cute just sums it up for me. But this was not a disappointment after volume 1, and I am super excited for volume 3. And then lastly, another excellent book. It's been a good second half of the month, and that is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This is another one that retells some Greek myths. This is a retelling of the Trojan War, but from the perspective of all of the different women whose lives are affected by the Trojan War, or like the majority of women. The names that we hear referenced in the original myths, whether they are main characters like Penelope or the goddesses like Aphrodite and Hera, or simply characters that we hear about very briefly like the wives of more minor heroes. They get their voice given back to them in this novel, and it's again very harrowing because I don't think you can tackle the subject of, well, war really in a non-harrowing way, but also the effects it has on women, because we have women who lose their husbands, who lose their sons, who lose their family, who are taken into sexual slavery, and the only women that really come out of this scenario unaffected are the goddesses. And I like that we got all those different perspectives. So we heard from the Greek women, the Trojan women, and the goddesses, nymphs and muses. So they all have different reactions and different feelings towards the war, but it shows that diversity of female voices who are often neglected in our discussion of classics, or at least have been over the past few centuries, because they are there in the ancient sources and they just need to have their voices highlighted. And I had the privilege of interviewing Natalie Haynes about this book over on my podcast, That's Ancient History, although the episode is not up yet. It's going up mid-May, so make sure you're following my podcast on Twitter and SoundCloud or whatever podcast app you use, and you will be alerted to when the interview with this author comes out, because it was so fascinating hearing from her. Natalie Haynes is such an interesting, fascinating woman and writer, and yeah, I thought this book was like even better than her last Greek myth retelling. I enjoyed Children of Jocasta, do not get me wrong, but this just felt like, you know, next level. So I'm so excited to see what she does next. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the second half of this video is reflecting on the OWL's Readathon, whose host I will link down below. But let's have a look at what the prompts were and whether I read anything in the whole month that worked for that. So first subject is Ancient Ruins, and for that you were to read a retelling, and I actually both read the retelling of the Trojan War by Natalie Haynes, and I also read The Raven and the Reindeer, which is a retelling of the Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, and the retelling was written by T. Kingfisher. So I've read a fairy tale and a myth retelling, so I think I have ticked that up. We then have Arithmancy, a work written by more than one author, and I've read 2 comic book volumes this month, this one and Bitch Planet Volume 2, which at least certainly have multiple contributors made up of, you know, artists and writers, so I'm gonna say I managed that. Don't know what you think, but I think so. We then have Astronomy, a book with star in the title, and I think this is my first subject that I have failed. I have not got astronomy because none of the books I'm looking at on my Goodreads here had the word star in it. I've got a book with the word moon in it, but I don't think that counts. So we did not get astronomy. But then we have Care of Magical Creatures, which is to read a book with a land animal on the cover, and this I did do. I read Girl Aquarium, which is a poetry collection by Jen Campbell and has an elephant on the front, so nailed that. Charms, read an adult work, absolutely fine. Read multiple adult books, whether it be Sealed, 1,000 Ships, Vertigo and Ghost. I DNF'd Crow Garden, but that was an adult work whilst I was reading it, and The Girl Aquarium, so definitely think I managed that. We then have Defence Against the Dark Arts, which is a title starting with an R, and like I mentioned earlier, I read a book called The Raven and the Reindeer, and I think we can get rid of the word the and accept that as an R title, so I have managed to do Defence Against the Dark Arts. Divination is a book set in the future. Bitch Planet Volume 2 would work for this because it is like a dystopian comic book series. Sealed would perhaps work. It's never quite clear in Sealed whether it's an alternative present or a near future, but I think with Bitch Planet at least I have managed to nail that one. Herbology, a book with a plant on the cover. This one, I don't know if this is being a little bit cheeky, but Sealed does have plants on the cover. Look, flower, leaf, wrapping up the baby. So, you know, I think that counts. We then have History of Magic, a book published at least 10 years ago, and I actually, quite appallingly, don't think I managed this one. So usually this wouldn't be a problem for me, but I think just bad luck. I haven't managed to read a book that came out more than 10 years ago. Nope, according to Goodreads I have not, so I do not get a History of Magic, which means I can't be a History of Magic teacher, which was one of the career paths I was considering pursuing. So it's okay, I'll move on, I'll find something else. Muggle Studies, read a contemporary novel. For this I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which is a YA thriller set in a small English village in a contemporary setting, so I'm pretty sure that fulfills that criteria. For Potions, you're to read a sequel. For this I read, you know, Moonstruck Volume 2, I read Bitch Planet Volume 2, assuming that I'm allowed to double up on these, I think I have done that. And then for Transfiguration, which is the last subject, read a book with sprayed edges or a red cover. And I never actually read a book with sprayed edges or finished a book with a red cover. I actually am reading a book that is older than 10 years and has a red cover, but I haven't finished it, so I don't think I'm allowed that one. But it does mean that I have completed all but 3 of the OWL subjects, which means I have an OWL in Ancient Ruins, Arithmancy, Care of Magical Creatures, Charms, Defence Against the Dark Art, Divination, Herbology, Muggle Studies and Potions, which gives me 9 OWLs to work with, and that also means when the NEWT's Readathon comes around in a few months I will be able to pursue a new academic career in the world of Harry Potter, hopefully. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. I would love to hear from you if you've read any of the books or are interested in reading any of the books I have talked about, and let me know how you did in the OWL Readathon if you were participating. But until next time, happy reading and I'll see you again soon. Bye guys!